Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Convos presented by Blackmagic Design. I'm one of your hosts, Timothy Reese, and we're excited to be partnering with the League of Filmmakers and Cinematography for Actors to bring you this live stream directly from the Gaslamp District / Corridor in downtown San Diego. And we're also excited to welcome Shanna Germain to our show. Shanna is an award-winning author, editor, and game designer, creative director, and the co-founder of Monte Cook Games. She's penned hundreds of poems, essays, short stories, novellas, novels, games, and articles. And we are so happy to have you on Comic-Con.
Thank you for having me. This is so fun.
And what I love about this especially is that this really was the coldest of emails for you to be here. Because
those are my favorite.
Right, because it's almost like this weird twist of fate, which is going to be great from what we're going to talk about today.
Oh no.
But the entire reason that I know you is because I am a fan of a podcast, which is a mega, like Goliath of a podcast at this point with so many fans. I sent them an email, a cold call email, being like, hey, you don't come to Comic-Con, would you? And they said, no. Like explicitly, they're like, not really our thing, but you should talk to Shanna.
I feel like this is how a lot of opportunities happen for me.
You've developed the reputation of like
being the person to talk to.
Yeah, you are the asset that is deployed. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This is awesome.
And this is your first Comic-Con?
It is my first Comic-Con. You know, this is my return to conventions post-pandemic. And so this is I think my 6th convention this year.
Wow.
And so I feel like I'm in the convention groove, and I'm also very ready to take a break from convention grooves, but it's been amazing. Like I've seen so many people that I haven't seen in years and years, and like I got to watch a couple of amazing panels. I got to be on a couple amazing panels.
Hex Harmonics, one of our panels.
Hex Harmonics was amazing.
Yeah.
And so I feel like you get to that place where you're like tired, but you're also sad that it's getting close to the end. So that's where I'm at right now, and a little raspy.
Is there anything that's been really stand out from, because San Diego Comic-Con famously has this enormous exhibit hall.
Yeah.
And which is like, I feel like it's like an aircraft carrier on the inside. So like,
I think they build rockets in there.
Yeah. Is there anything then that's been really stand out from you being in there compared to other cons you go to?
It's a tricky year because I have a concussion right now. And so being on the floor is a little bit like, ho. So that's new and I don't recommend it. Don't ever do that. But I do think like one of the things that I love so much about that is that you get to see people who, like for me, I was a huge comic fan growing up. And so you get to see like artists who are still doing the work of things that they drew when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And they're just standing there in front of you. And I don't know, there's just something so magical about that moment where you're like, that's a real person who's done a real thing like for a really long time and like honed their art and had a huge impact on me and my love of stories and my love of art. And I just find those moments really magical.
When you were growing up, did you have that? Because this is for me, is that I have this wall that's put up with whimsy where I don't want to know the behind the scenes of something.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to ever peek behind the curtain. I want the magic to just be the magic. I don't even want to talk about it, right? Like I don't want to go near it. Like we do not pierce the veil. And so the question was, did you find that experience? Because I know that when being an adult, meeting the creators of these shows, their perspective is so sometimes radically, it's radically different, but also really interesting.
Yeah.
Like a family friend of Danielle's wrote the Gummy Bears theme, right? And like I still sing it, And meeting her was so wild, right? Because I'm like, wow, you wrote this thing that like shaped my sense of music.
Yeah. Isn't that fantastic and amazing? And like, it is that sort of don't meet your heroes thing because you just never know, right? You just like, And so on one hand, like as a creator, I ascribe to be the kind of person who never says, I'm so sad I met her, right? Because I never want to break that sort of in a bad way, break that veil in a bad way, right? I always want to add to the experience of the things that I've written. But I do think as someone who loves creativity and creators, that chance to see like how they think and how they because every creator is so different and has their own, like our brains are so fascinating. So like if they're cool and awesome, I love that opportunity to kind of get to know just sort of what's going on behind there. The one place that I don't do that is I don't like to listen to actors. Like if I really, really love a thing, that I don't really want to listen to the actors talk like about the thing, because somehow that breaks the immersion for me. I mean, after time, that's okay. But if I've just watched it, I'm like, no, turn it off. I don't want to see that.
Have you seen the Lord of the Rings DVD commentaries?
Yes.
Okay, that's a special
but that
case.
was like, that's different.
I love that there's like a revival of those on Instagram right now.
Really?
And people just keep clipping them. And it's amazing how it's like it's scripted.
That's awesome.
Because they talk about pranks they did to each other. And there's one of John Rhys Davies and Orlando Bloom talking about this whole thing about them being in canoes, learning how to paddle. And he's just like, Orlando doesn't know how to paddle a canoe. And it cuts to Orlando. He's like, he said that, did he? Is that what he said? That man is incredible.
That camaraderie is so.
Yeah.
I mean, that's such one of the great parts of creativity is that camaraderie behind the scenes, where you're exhausted and you're trying to make a thing and you're full of ideas and you don't really have any place to put them, and so you turn them into pranks. Like I think that's amazing.
Oh, speaking of camaraderie, that's a nice pivot to the reason that I got in touch with you in the first place, which is this wonderful thing you've created, which is the RPG for the podcast Old Gods of Appalachia. And if you're not familiar with Old Gods of Appalachia, it is this eldritch horror set in the Appalachian alternate reality South that explores so many incredible themes and is kind of unfettered by some aspects of history in order to be, I would say, like more sensitive and more critical of aspects of history.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is radical to listen to, because when you're listening to it, you keep waiting to hear something and go like, oh no, they've gone too far. And they don't.
They're so good at walking that line.
And they're so good about reaching out to the people that are affected by these historic tragedies to write these other ones. It's amazing.
Yeah, it really is.
It's been a podcast that was released. It's a narrative. It had an incredibly successful Kickstarter, over $2 million raised for their partnership with Monte Cook Games to turn into an RPG book. And I would love to talk to you about that.
No pressure at the $2 million mark. We were just like, whoa.
Yeah, because you're taking something that is, in the rawest sense, oral storytelling.
Yes.
And going, okay, this is a script that maybe isn't bound by needing to follow. I mean, it's not bound by needing to follow any mechanics because it's a story.
Right.
And there's always that wibbly wobbly aspect to Old Gods, which is like, how strong is something? How good is something? How bad is something?
Yeah.
So what was that like whenever you needed to go, okay, we have this project. It's this incredible kind of vague, long storytelling on the back end, meaning that there's so many mysteries unexplored.
Yeah.
And now put numbers next to things.
I know, right?
And play a game.
Hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, so first I have to tell the story of fate, how this came into be.
Please.
Because I have a friend named Jordan Shibley who writes this amazing thing called Dread Singles, which are basically sort of, I'm probably not going to describe this right, but it was like, for a long time, it was really popular on Twitter, where it was like single monsters looking for single monsters. And it was really beautiful and delightful. And so we've been friends for a long time. And he was like, hey, I know these other people are friends of mine, and they're looking for someone to do a game. And they had sort of an experience where they had met with people and they couldn't kind of find the right fit.
Right.
And so we met with them. So that was like a fate moment too, where like, we didn't know them. We knew of them and we'd listened to their podcast. And so we got together. And then when we started talking about the storytelling of games versus the mechanics of games, that's when we really knew that it was going to be a really good fit. Yeah. Because you're right, like so many of the monsters, for example, just as an example, in their setting, don't even have names, and that's what makes them so scary. Or if they do have names, it's like this malleable maybe kind of name, or they have 6 names, and that
like
really
the deer.
The deer that is not the deer.
The stag.
Right? Which
is like, this is genuinely horrifying.
It is.
Even as like a longtime D&D player on shows, like they are scary monsters.
They are. And part of the reason that they're so scary is because you never see the whole thing. Yeah. And they don't have a name. And like if you were like, is this a level 10? Is this level 6,000? Like what's the range here? So one of the real challenges that I love so much, because I am such a storyteller at heart, was taking these creatures that didn't have names and didn't have stats and actually had like really malleable abilities. Like sometimes they could do one thing and sometimes they couldn't, and sometimes they could grant boons, but they were really complicated. Right. And then making them into something that was able to be played at the table by giving them, like you said, numbers, which makes them instantly less scary. Yeah. Names, less scary.
14 hit points. And you're
you're
really?
like, okay, right.
Why did they just punch them in the story?
Right.
Maybe sense.
Right. So like one of the things that we were able to do is give them really interesting sort of abilities or unique talents and make it so that the players never knew which one they were going to use.
Right.
And then give the GM a ton of advice on like how to keep these monsters scary, how to make sure that you're not over-explaining or oversimplifying, never tell them the numbers, never like really showcase the abilities, never describe sort of fully. And so we did a lot to help the GM really maintain this sense of horror and WTF and like all of the essences that you get when you're just doing a listening experience.
Yeah.
And I love that kind of challenge. That makes me happy because I'm not super into the mechanics. I would much rather tell a story.
Yeah.
And so like if I could have gotten away without giving them numbers, I probably would have. But yeah, it was a really, really fun challenge to be able to do that.
What was it like with the magic system? Because when it comes to the idea, and I say magic system,
Yeah.
because system would like be a misunderstanding of actually what Old Gods of Appalachia is about.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the idea of the green,
yeah.
right, in this aspect of this magic that's not necessarily good,
Right.
but pretty good,
But fairly good, like better than other things.
yeah. And it's like that, the wonderful drawl of Cam whenever he's introduced. Sorry, I have Steve Shell, correct? Whenever he's introducing these characters, and he's like, in the deep green, and it's kind of like this beautiful
voice.
yeah. And so, what was it like whenever you were doing the concept of how these magics are supposed to be manifest, especially compared to something like Dungeons and Dragons, right? Which has a very, you can wrap your head around it.
Yeah.
It's almost academic in some sense.
Yeah, very much so.
Because the spell slot, the entire idea of the spells is that the whole rules lawyer thing comes about from going, well, listen, okay, hold on. It says touch, but I have a familiar with hands. So can my familiar cast it if they touch someone with their hands? And it's like,
it's the rule of the thing versus the essence of the thing in many ways, right?
And so like, how did you kind of wrap your head around that aspect of thinking about the weird that needs to happen?
Well, thankfully, like weird is kind of one of my loves, and it's one of the loves of our company. We do a lot of weird stuff. So so one of the great things is I was able to listen to the podcast a ton. I read all the transcripts a ton. And then I also read a lot of like other things that were written from and for Appalachia. So like fiction, but also nonfiction, like there's tons and tons of books out there that are like the folklore remedies of how to make magic and like all this kind of stuff. And so I really immersed myself in it, I would say, for like 6 months before I wrote a thing, because I wanted to feel that essence. I wanted to know. And I grew up sort of in upstate New York, which is sort of on the borderline of the Appalachian region.
Yeah.
So like a lot of like the sayings and some of the like really cool beliefs and like the way that I pronounced words all sort of meshed with that anyway. So it's kind of interesting.
Like, it's weird too, because I lived in, I grew up a big portion of my life in Appalachia, North Carolina. And so it's like, it's just really, it's really odd how that is a very specific pocket of the American geography. I mean, first of all, it's one of the oldest mountain ranges in the world. But also this weird, it's like this game of telephone with this tradition that is just in Appalachia.
Very oral. Yeah.
And it's, so sorry, I didn't mean.
No. I got thinking because I also wrote this dinosaur game. And it was, and then it has the Appalachian Mountains in there, of course, because that was part of that like space too, which is just so cool. Sorry, I got all excited about something else. So I immersed myself really deeply in like the language and the magic. And then I think the way that I really came through that was that everything is malleable and everything is unknown. Like one of the big things about the podcast is like, you can't know the old gods, because if you know the old gods, the world is over, right? And so we didn't put any of the old gods in the book, because they are, if they ever showed up in your game, it's done. The party's done,
They're
right?
out.
The world is done. And so sometimes like keeping that mystery by not breaking the magic down too much is really important. But we did a thing too where we have ciphers, which are kind of our magic items. And for each of those, you have to like do a thing. You have to do this homebrewed ritual, and you have to like go get the graveyard dirt or whatever the thing is.
So much.
Because it's so hands-on. It's such hands-on magic. It's such homebrewed magic.
Yeah. With the wards.
And so, and even things like, if you have a magic item and it breaks or it fails to work, like in order to keep using it, you have to go find the entity that is somehow, works with that magic item. And you have to decide whether you're going to take their bargain in order to make it work again.
Right.
And like, I feel like this game is so much about like heart and hope. And so like, and bargaining and like like keeping your honor and family. And so we did a lot of the magic with like, what are you going to give up for this power?
Oh, wow.
So that you have to make a choice as a character all the time of whether you want to, do you really want to save your friend? Well, what are you willing to give up? And I think that's just such a beautiful place at the table.
I like the idea of it being safe and unsafe.
Yes.
Like an unsafe choice, right?
Yeah.
Where you're allowed in this, you're in a game, but at the same time you forget in a safe way, to make these incredibly bold and dangerous choices that are outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah, because it mimics life, right? We're always making choices that are slightly unsafe. And so if we make them in a game and we get to make them and we get to experience them and do things that we might not do in real life, you can sort of scale that back and relive that experience and make choices. And I think that's one of the great things about stories. And this just sort of takes it to the next level.
Yeah. I remember the fact that there are caves in the Appalachian Mountains that are older than bones.
I mean, how is that even possible, right? Doesn't that just break your brain, but in like the most beautiful way? I love that so much.
Yeah, it's just wild. So bringing it now to what you're working on now.
Yeah, so we're doing a new set of Appalachian rulebooks. It's called Deeper Still. It's way darker. Like, this is my horror childhood coming to the forefront.
Okay.
So it's super dark. It's super deep. There's a book for players where you get some new character options and new backgrounds and all this kind of stuff. And lots of new connections so that you have a lot more to lose.
Okay.
Which is one of my favorite places to put characters in. And then it's got some new adventures and it has a bunch of new creatures and magic items and magic and all the things that I super love to write. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. I'm very excited about it.
If you haven't checked it out yet, I backed on Kickstarter like way back before. I mean, that was like, once I started reading it, I was like, okay, this is why. Yeah, it's really good. So if you haven't checked it out, you should definitely check it out. It's really good.
Thank you.
And now that, what are you also working on? In your writing right now?
So I'm finishing up a novella. I'm finishing up a novella about dogs that talk to ghosts using the buttons. Have you seen the dogs that talk to buttons? So they can hear ghosts, and so they can relay stories from ghosts to humans using the buttons for like murder mysteries and stuff, which is really fun.
I love this.
And then I have a novel in the works about a psychopomp who is taking a living girl through the underworld, and sort of what that story is and how that changes her. And I have a deep obsession. I always say my topics are sex and death, and so this one has both. Persephone's her girlfriend. And it's super fun. And so, those are the kind of big projects that I have this year. I'm very neurospicy, so I like to have my fingers in a lot of pots at once.
That's awesome. I remember you were on the Hex Harmonics panel. You mentioned about the way you listen to music when you write.
Yes. Oh, it's huge.
Yeah. And I believe you said you just wear out a song, right? Yeah. You just 65, 75 times, 85 times, however long the day is.
I get obsessed with it and and eventually it becomes like the soundtrack to the thing that I'm writing, and it has this pattern, and then suddenly you hear a lyric and you wake up and you realize you've been listening to the song for like 3 hours while you're writing. And I don't know, it's just such a weird moment,
Yeah.
But it helps me get into that headspace so much to have. And I get obsessed with things to the point where, and then of course, like I'm done. I don't want to hear it for a year.
Yeah. So. When it comes to, as we get to the end here, when it comes to you being at conventions, do you have any tips that you have for people that have never been to Comic-Con, have never been to a con, that want to go? Because most of the people that are going to be watching, didn't come.
Right.
That's the idea.
That's true.
This is for
Hello.
you. This is for you.
Welcome.
So you should come to these conventions. They're fantastic. But do you have any tips as a veteran convention goer?
Yeah, so I will caveat that these are mine because I'm super shy. I'm very introverted. I find that I have to take some time beforehand, before conventions and between events, to make sure that I recharge and recoup. So don't overbook yourself. Right. Wear shoes that aren't going to give you blisters, especially somewhere hot, because it's hot to be walking around. And don't be afraid to I feel like saying nice things to people is such a great way to open doors and make, so if somebody has an amazing outfit or you love their art, they want to hear that. Creators, we work at home, most of the year by ourselves and put things out in the world, and we're like, does anybody like this? Please like me, right? Yeah. And so if there's someone that you like their work or you love what they're doing, don't be rude, but don't hesitate to go and say, hey, I love this thing. Thank you so much for making it, or here's how it affected me.
It's way less weird to tell someone you like their thing than to do that odd part where you recognize someone and just smile at them, which is so unnerving on the other end, because you're like, why are you smiling? Like I have to do the narrative now. Like, what is this?
Yeah,
like,
that can really
so if you like someone, just tell them.
Yeah.
Unless they're eating, then just walk away.
Yeah, like if they're in the restroom, question your choices. But you know.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, is there anything you're looking forward to do before the con runs out?
I have the panel tonight on women in entertainment that I'm going to go to. I'm super excited about that.
Awesome.
And then I have lunch with one of my favorite people in the whole world, who's Robin Hobb, who's a fantastic author. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
Cool. Did you hear the breaking news about the women in entertainment panel?
I did, but you should say it again.
Yeah, the new guest. The new guest. We're so excited. We have Rachel on with Tiny Chef, the Tiny Chef show, and I'm just so excited. And this is honestly a case of being at the convention and seeing Tiny Chef.
And you said something nice, didn't you?
Like our production designer, Lauren, spotted Tiny Chef. She was like, I know that little man. And we walked up and just chatted and got along so well. And Rachel was available. And it's just, it's like that organic thing is just so special. Because like where else in the world are you going to have this many creators?
Right, because there are already people who are your people, right?
Yeah.
So like you're already have this connection of something existing. It's not like you're walking around in the world with strangers.
Yeah.
It's really lovely.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited that you were able to be
This is
here.
glorious.
Thank you. All right. So thank you everyone for watching this segment. We're going to have a next guest up in about 20 minutes. So stay tuned for that. And also I want to give a big shout out to the League of Filmmakers, who are the partners for this. League of Filmmakers is a new indie collective coming out of Blackmagic Design that's all about allowing indie filmmakers to connect, to create, and make it easier to network and put together films and projects in the world. And it's all about crossing that great divide between knowing someone and not knowing someone, and making it a lot easier to fix that. So feel free to head to leagueoffilmmakers.com to sign up about it if you're a filmmaker, find out more information, and get connected. And so thank you so much. We'll be back very soon, and have a great rest of your con.